You're the one who is before us, and I think you ought to know if there was any consideration offered or paid in return for that settlement. It's a very simple fact question. Was there or was there not?
I suggest that you speak with the Treasury attorneys.
If this kind of behavior is okay with the chairman, I'll just pursue other questions. But, you know, what goes around comes around in terms of dodging questions.
Scott Bessent tried the same escape hatch he'd used all day. I can't answer. There's ongoing litigation. And this time, he ran straight into a career prosecutor. Sheldon Whitehouse, former U.S. attorney, wasn't asking for legal strategy. He was asking simple fact questions about the deal that lets the Trump family escape any tax audit. Was there any precedent for it? None. Was the government paid anything in return for giving Trump no audit, no investigation, no penalties? Bessent hid behind litigation, and Whitehouse, who spent his career in courtrooms, shut the excuse down cold. A witness can absolutely state a fact he knows, even during litigation. Saying there was no consideration is a fact. The dodge wasn't the law protecting him. It was a game, and Whitehouse named it. Watch this. If you want to support the channel and get exclusive videos, kindly hit the join button below. That's how we keep this going.
Thanks very much. Secretary, welcome. Have you identified any precedent in Treasury or IRS history for the agreement not to audit, investigate, or pursue any tax claims against the Trump family or businesses?
I can't identify any precedent where 400,000 tax returns, including the people you just mentioned and all of their employees, were leaked in a violation of one of the most sacred duties of the IRS.
So let me cut to that then.
Senator.
The leak was by a contractor. Can you tell me what contribution is being sought by Treasury or by the IRS for the harm done by the contractor? To a certain extent, your organization and the IRS are the victim of the contractor's malfeasance or negligence. What is being pursued by way of contribution by that contractor?
Well, the ranking member chastised me for cutting the contractor's contracts off, and we have removed their contracts, their ability to do business with Treasury and the IRS.
But there is no contribution into this particular case.
Again, Senator, you weren't here earlier, but I'm unable to discuss most of this because of ongoing litigation.
Yeah, I know everybody likes to say that, but the constitutional...
We like to follow the law, Senator.
And the law is that the Congress has constitutional oversight functions that do not disappear simply because there is litigation, however convenient it may be, by way of providing answers. So we have no precedent for it. No contribution is being sought from the contractor at fault. Was there any consideration to the government in return for the benefits of no audit, no investigation, no challenge or pursuit of refunds or other penalties?
Again, Senator, I'm unable to comment because of litigation. Treasury is represented by the Department of Justice in all matters. They act as our attorneys, so I would suggest that you direct your questions to Acting Attorney General Blanche.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of times people who are before us invite me to ask my questions of somebody who's not before us, but you're the one who is before us, and I think you ought to know if there was any consideration offered or paid in return for that settlement. It's a very simple fact question. Was there or was there not consideration?
Again, there's ongoing litigation, and I suggest that you speak with the Treasury attorneys.
If this kind of behavior is okay with the chairman, I'll just pursue other questions. But, you know, what goes around comes around in terms of dodging questions.
I believe it's very clear that witnesses of any kind cannot discuss ongoing litigation?
They can certainly discuss a fact that they are aware of. The fact that there is some litigation out there doesn't mean that a witness can't say, yeah, there was no consideration, or yes, there was consideration. Was there a defense analysis memo? It's referenced in the judge's decision in Florida. Was there a defense analysis memo prepared by the IRS? And more specifically, did you see it?
Again, I'm not going to be able to comment on these matters.
Mr. Chairman, this just makes no sense at all. I've been a lawyer all my life. I have some idea of what is protected when you have a ongoing bit of litigation. Whether this individual has seen an official memo from within his own department is a very simple question to answer, and I think it's completely inappropriate to have this game of dodgem be pursued without any consequences. Well, last of all, here's another question. Was there any analysis of what harm befell President Trump from having his taxes released when every president since Nixon released their taxes and he had promised to? Did anybody analyze whether there was actually any harm at all to him in those circumstances?
So there was a crime. President's rights under 6103 of the IRS code was violated, and equally as important, 400,000 taxpayers had that right violated, including every employee of the Trump administration, the housekeepers at Doral, the greenskeepers, and the cashiers.
And you're welcome to pursue all of that,
but
it doesn't answer the question of whether the president actually suffered harm. And you're not answering that question either.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Secretary Bessent, let's start with something you and I agree strongly on. Last year, you came out in support of a trading ban for members of Congress, and I have introduced legislation to do exactly that. You explained the need for a ban on our trading stock by saying, quote, you look at some of these eye-popping returns, every hedge fund would be jealous of them. And that, quote, if any private citizen traded that way, the SEC would be knocking on their door. Those are strong words from someone who used to run a hedge fund. Last month, President Trump's latest financial disclosures came out, and they show that he made more than 3,400 stock trades worth more than $250 million in just the first 3 months of 2026. That's roughly half of what all 535 members of Congress made last year combined. And the value of virtually every one of those stocks that the president traded in is directly affected by President Trump's official actions. So, Secretary Bessent, you and I agree that it is a conflict of interest for members of Congress to trade stocks. Do you also agree that it's a conflict of interest for President Trump to trade stocks?
Well, a couple of things, Senator. One, President Trump is not sitting in the Oval Office engaging in a high-frequency trading strategy. Clearly, clearly he had an outside manager who was doing that. And I think it's incumbent upon both houses of Congress to get their house in order before you move to the administrative branch.
You think it's okay for the president to do this? Because let's be clear, you are a Wall Street guy, so you know better. The investments that President Trump has made are not blind. President Trump literally signed the 113-page document publicly listing all of his individual stock trades at the same time that he is making decisions affecting those stocks. So you're going to sit here with straight face and say it's not a conflict of interest for the President of the United States to do that?
I'm going to say this body needs to get its house in order first.
How about we get the White House in order at the same time?
I would encourage you to do that.
I don't trade in individual stocks. I don't own any individual stocks. My house is in order. Thank you.
Senator, you're very
Mr.
rich.
Secretary.
Others on this committee can't say that, Senator.
Let's look at some individual trades. On January 6th, Donald Trump purchased up to $1 million worth of NVIDIA stock. 1 week later, his administration changed U.S. policy and loosened the rules on export controls so that NVIDIA could sell its chips to China. Now the price of NVIDIA stock is through the roof. So Secretary Bessent, you said last year, if any private citizen traded the way members of Congress do, quote, the SEC would be knocking on their door. So my question is, should the SEC be knocking on President Trump's door to start an investigation over this trade?
Again, if this body wants to ban individual stock trading, which I would advocate for yourselves, start there. And if you want legislative action to continue, that's your prerogative.
So it's our prerogative. So you would support our saying that President Trump should be investigated over this?
I would support
our trade should be investigated and President Trump should be investigated.
I would support you getting your house in order, Senator.
And how about the White House getting its house in order? Would you support that investigation?
Please lead by example.
I would like to see the President of the United States lead by example. You say there should be an investigation when that kind of activity takes place. How about we start with the White House?
Well, you create
one
statute.
More.
The President
Trump bought tens of thousands of dollars worth of stock in Robinhood and the Bank of New York Mellon Corporation, known as BNY. On April 6th, your Treasury Department announced it had chosen the financial agent to implement the new Trump accounts program, BNY and its partner, Robinhood. Both stocks, of course, have risen since then. So, Secretary Bessent, let me ask you a different question. If these stock purchases that Trump made were made using inside information, would that be illegal?
Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to speak to that. And I think,
would it be worth investigating? You don't have to be a lawyer. You're the one who said what should be investigated.
Why don't we investigate many people on this committee, Senator? Many people.
And you don't think the White House should have to follow the same set of rules that are already the law?
I think you should get your house in order here.
My house is in order. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And you should have your fellow committee members, mostly on your side of the aisle, do the same.
We need stronger anti-corruption rules and conflict of interest rules in Washington for everyone. And that includes the president and it includes Congress. And instead of draining the swamp, what Donald Trump is doing is he is enriching himself by taking advantage of his position. That is not public service. He's the one who should lead by example.
Let's be absolutely clear about what Sheldon Whitehouse exposed in this hearing. The Treasury Secretary spent the day deflecting every question about Trump's tax settlement by claiming he couldn't discuss ongoing litigation. But when he tried that on a former federal prosecutor, Whitehouse dismantled the excuse in real time, showing that the questions he was asking were simple factual ones that no litigation privilege protects, and that the dodge was exactly that. He opens with the precedent question, and it's devastating in its simplicity. Has Bessent identified any precedent anywhere in the history of the Treasury or the IRS for an agreement not to audit, investigate, or pursue any tax claims against the Trump family or their businesses? Bessent doesn't offer one. Instead, he pivots to the leak, the violation in which 400,000 taxpayers' returns, including Trump's, were exposed by a contractor. Whitehouse lets him make that point and then turns it into another question. Since the leak was committed by a contractor and Treasury and the IRS were to some extent the victims of that contractor's misconduct, what contribution is Treasury seeking from the contractor for the harm done? In other words, if this is really about the harm from the leak, is the government going after the party actually responsible? Bessent's answer reveals the hollowness. The contractor's contracts were cut off, but no financial contribution is being pursued. The party genuinely at fault pays nothing, while Trump walks away with audit immunity. Then White House asks the question that becomes the heart of the exchange, and the one Bessent most wants to avoid. Was there any consideration to the government in return for the benefits Trump received? The no audit, no investigation, no pursuit of refunds or penalties? In law, consideration means something of value given in exchange. White House is asking the most basic question about any settlement. What did the public get back for handing the president this extraordinary benefit? Bessent retreats to his shield. He can't comment because of litigation, and Treasury is represented by the Justice Department, so White House should direct his questions to Acting Attorney General Blanche. And this is where being a prosecutor matters. White House doesn't accept the referral. He notes that witnesses love to send him to ask someone who isn't in the room, but Bessent is the one before the committee, and he ought to know whether consideration was offered or paid. It's a very simple fact question, White House says. Was there or was there not consideration? When Bessent again invokes litigation, White House delivers the line that guts the whole strategy. The existence of litigation does not mean a witness can't state a fact. A witness can certainly say, yes, there was consideration, or no, there was none. That's not legal strategy. That's not privileged work product. It's a fact the secretary knows or doesn't. And White House, drawing on a lifetime in the law, makes clear he knows exactly what litigation actually protects. He presses the point with a second factual question that exposes the game even more sharply. A defense analysis memo prepared by the IRS is referenced in a judge's decision in Florida. White House asks whether that memo exists, and more specifically, whether Bessent has seen it, whether a cabinet secretary has personally read an official memo from within his own department is about as simple a yes or no as exists. It reveals no legal strategy whatsoever. Bessent still won't answer, and White House names it for the committee. He's been a lawyer all his life. He knows what's protected in ongoing litigation, and whether this witness has seen a memo from his own department, this game of dodgeball, pursued without consequence, is completely inappropriate. Then White House closes with the question that punctures the entire justification for the settlement. The whole premise is that Trump was harmed when his tax returns were released. So White House asks, was there any analysis of what harm actually befell Trump from having his taxes released? When every president since Nixon has voluntarily released their taxes and Trump himself had promised to? Did anyone analyze whether there was any real harm at all? Bessent doesn't answer that either. He pivots back to the privacy violation, Section 6103 of the tax code, the 400,000 taxpayers, the housekeepers at Doral, the greenskeepers, the cashiers. And White House grants that all of those people's rights matter and are worth pursuing. But it doesn't answer his question, and he says so plainly, you're not answering whether the president actually suffered any harm